Okay, we're making Texas cookies today. And I have a big bowl. We're going to be putting all the ingredients in there. And I'm going to kind of fill you in on some of the ingredients as we go. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to show you how we measure wet and dry. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take our eggs and I'm going to go ahead and in this big bowl, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix the wet ingredients. So there's wet ingredients and dry ingredients. The first wet ingredient I'm going to add is I'm going to add, according to my recipe here, it looks like I need 12 tablespoons of butter. Now I've melted it and cooled it a tiny bit. That's what we need for this recipe, just melted butter. And we are going to add into that melted butter, we're going to add in brown sugar. Now brown sugar, the proper measurement is 1.5 cups of brown sugar. And if you take a look at it, it almost looks like the sand castles that you build at the beach. Brown sugar has to be packed, and it's lightly packed. You don't have to squish it really hard, but you can't just measure it like you would at flour or you would sugar, just scoop it. You have to lightly pack it in to get the proper measure. So what makes these cookies really nice is that brown sugar gives that really nice chewy texture to the cookie. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix this together. I'm going to take my big spatula to work on it with the big spatula. And I will show you kind of what this looks like wet sand because I'm just mixing the butter in with the brown sugar. Try to get it as incorporated as you can. Now this recipe, I'm using a big bowl and I'm using a spatula and spoons and whatever else. You could mix this in a mixer if you wanted. But the nice thing about this recipe and the reason I'm doing it is such a quick recipe. You could literally freeze half of the dough in scoops and then you would have it for whenever you wanted right out of the oven. Now, why it's called a Texas cookie, I'm not quite sure. I think maybe I got it from my sister who lives in Texas. I've also heard it called a presidential cookie, which indicates probably it's online somewhere from a president or a president's favorite. I don't have any kind of recipe. I have a recipe collection, but I have not developed these recipes. These recipes are online for anyone. All right, so we have butter, we have sugar. Look at it, it's like a wet sand. And I will go ahead and try to get you some close-ups as much as I can in quarantine, filming myself. I'm gonna go ahead and add to the butter and the melted sugar, I'm gonna add an egg and an egg yolk. What I wanted to address for the egg and the egg yolk is an egg, you're going to go ahead and you're going to just crack it in. You're going to verify that you don't have any shell in it and there's no blood or any defects in the egg. And then you're just going to add your egg in. Look underneath. If it's in a clear or a silver container, metal containers are really nice too to find eggshells. Go ahead and plop it in. Now, there's a lot of people that ask me, how do you separate an egg? What's the best way? They have devices that you can actually crop the egg in, the egg white drips through, and you have the egg yolk and you dump the yolk in. There's another way, and the other way that I do it is I literally open an egg and I put the egg into my hand. I open my fingers a tiny bit. I let all the egg white drip out and I have my egg yolk in my hand. It is the best way. If you use the sharp sides of the egg yolk, the egg shell, it tends to break the egg, and that's not what you want. You don't want to get them mixed up. Now, for many recipes, if you got any egg yolk in the egg white would not whip properly with the protein of the yolk in it. And you would have to start over and get clean egg white. In this case, if a little bit of yolk got in the white or vice versa, it's not a big deal. All right, so now what we have is we have our eggs now to incorporate in our sugar and our butter mixture. Now, something about eggs that you may not be familiar with, and that is if eggs are room temperature, they incorporate into the ingredients a lot easier. So I'm able to incorporate these because my eggs have sat out for a little bit. Now, one of the things that you want to know is if you forget and you're making your recipe and you forget to put your eggs out at room temperature, which I always do, get a pan or a bowl or something, put your eggs in, run some warm water out of the faucet, let them sit in warm water for a while. You don't want to cook them. You don't want hot water running over them for 10 minutes, but you certainly can bring them to room temperature. Okay, so now we're going to measure the dry ingredients because we have wet ingredients And you notice that the brown sugar is considered a wet ingredient because it does get incorporated into the butter. Now, to measure my dry ingredients, we need 1 1/4 cups of flour. So I'm gonna go and show you how we measure flour. You're gonna go ahead and you're gonna kind of loosen the flour a little bit. See how I'm kind of loosening it? You don't wanna pack it. So I loosen it, and then I just take my finger and I just run my finger across and I level it out. So that's my 1/4 cup that I need, and then I need 1 more cup. And I go ahead and I loosen it a little bit, just a little bit. Whatever container you have your flour in, loosen it a little bit, even if it's in a bag. And go ahead and just run your finger over it to get a nice level scoop. So I have 1 1/4 cups of flour. I'm gonna set that over here. Now, to that flour, we're gonna add our baking powder and our baking soda. And like I say in a lot of my videos, make certain that these are not expired because these are your leaveners. So we have a 1/2 teaspoon of soda, baking soda. And baking soda is kind of an easier measure to make level because the lid has cardboard on it and you can literally make a level scoop. So I have a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. I need 3/4 teaspoon of my baking powder. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to use my 1/2 and my 1/4. And this you have to kind of level it off yourself or with your finger. You could do it with your finger as well. All right, so now I have my 3/4 of baking powder and my 1/2 of soda. And then I need a 1/2 teaspoon as well of my salt. Even sweet recipes do need some salt to bring out flavor. Now I'm just going to whisk this together. This is just kind of to incorporate the leaveners into the flour. Flour made me kind of cough. Inhaling powder. All right, so next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add our vanilla. Our vanilla, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put in 1 teaspoon of vanilla inside of our wet ingredients. Now, in one of my videos, I showed you how important it is to pour away from your ingredients in case you overpour. With vanilla, not such a worry because if you put a little bit of extra vanilla in anything, it's only gonna make it better. But if you were to put like extra extract in, extract is extremely strong, then you could even potentially ruin your recipe. So pour away from your bowl if it's not something that you want to spill in by accident. And it does happen. It happens to me. It happened to me on video recently. All right, so I tossed in my vanilla into my butter and my sugar and my eggs. And now what I'm gonna go ahead and do, I'm gonna verify that I have all my ingredients. So I know that I have my flour, I know that I have my baking powder, and I know that I have my baking soda. I know that I put my salt in, the wet ingredients. I know I have my sugar that I packed, my brown sugar that I had to pack to measure properly, my 12 tablespoons of melted butter. I had my egg and an egg yolk, and then I have my teaspoon of vanilla. Once I verify that, now I'm gonna add my dry to my wet. Now what I like to do is I like to add it in 2 different increments because it does take a few minutes for the dry to incorporate into the wet. Not a long time, and remember, to do this in a big bowl without a mixer, I'm going slowly to show you what to do. This is a really quick recipe. You could whip this up in less than 10 minutes and have it in the oven. Your oven should be preheating to 350 so that by the time you're just ready to throw this all together, it's already ready to go into the oven pretty fast. All right, so I'm gonna put the rest of my powder in, my dry ingredients, sorry. And I'm gonna go ahead and mix that in. Now, the goodies that we put in this, they're significant. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add oats. You can use instant oats. You can do the quick oats, or instant oats is what they're sometimes called, or you can use old-fashioned. I would not use steel cut. Steel cut are too tough. They would add a great texture, but I don't know that they would be the best ingredient for this recipe. So it really doesn't matter what kind of oats you add as long as you don't use steel cut. So I am using an old-fashioned. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dump in 1 1/4 cups of oats. Then I'm gonna add my 1 cup of toasted pecans. Now how I toast pecans, I put them in a dry skillet on low, about 5 to 7 minutes. You'll start smelling them. Shake them or stir them a little bit around. And what it does is it brings out the nutty flavor, brings the oils out. They're very different in a cookie when they're toasted a little bit as opposed to dry out of a bag. So that's the way I do it. And if you don't like nuts, remember nuts can always be left out of a recipe or interchanged. I have 1 cup of coconut, and I have 2/3 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips. So if you take a look at this, I have quite a bit of ingredients. So if you take a look, I have my coconut, I have my chocolate chips, I have my oatmeal, and my pecans that I toasted. So now all I'm doing is I'm going to toss this together. And there are more ingredients that I just added at the end than there are in actual dough. So we have incorporating to do. So what I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do is I'm going to toss this in. Seems like I keep getting flour in my nose. All right, that coconut sure makes this a yummy recipe. If you don't like coconut, remember, it can always be left out as well. It does make for a delicious cookie though. I have also known people to not like coconut, and I sneak it in and I grind it really small so you can't see it. And a lot of people wonder, what is that ingredient that they can't put their finger on? And if they don't see the coconut, sometimes they don't even know the coconut's in there. So that's always an option. Now, the way we measure this, once you get it all incorporated, it's a pretty thick dough. So once you get this incorporated, there are 2 ways you can do this. You can go ahead and you can use a scoop. And I usually use a scoop, and I get a little bit full. And then I go ahead and I put it on the cookie sheet. So if you look at this, it's about the size of a golf ball. So I could have golf ball size cookies, and that'd be great. Texas cookies, golf ball size cookies, you know, it's a smaller portion. If, however, I wanted to do larger ones, I could use a measuring cup. I could get this measuring cup full to the top, and I could go ahead and I could scoop it out. And now I have a Texas size cookie, and they are very big. I would probably only put 6 of those on my tray, 6. However, now I can no longer use this size. I can only use one size because they all have to be the same size to cook properly. These are going to cook for 15 to 17 minutes at 350. They'll be a little soft around the edges. It'll almost look like they're a little bit raw, but you want to make sure you take them out of the oven when they look like that, because they're super soft and chewy, and they're so filled with ingredients. You don't want to overcook them. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 6 on this tray. I'm going to go ahead and come back. I'm going to show you what they look like, and we'll plate them up. I'll try to give you a close-up of the actual cookie when it's done. See you soon. The oven, and they're cooled down, our Texas cookies. They're very large. Look at how large they cook up. They are fully loaded with ingredients. So to cool them off, you definitely want to put them on something. Carryover cooking is what happens when the cookies sit on the hot cookie sheet for longer. So if you've cooked them and you've kind of cooked them as long as they need to be cooked, take them off as soon as they're able to be scooped quickly, even if you use a big spatula, because you definitely don't want these to cook longer. They're supposed to be a little bit wiggly around the edge and very chewy, because the brown sugar in these cookies make them very chewy. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put, actually I'm gonna plate one up for you, and I'm gonna show you the close-up, what that looks like. Don't want it to fall off. It's got lots of chocolate chips. I can see the nuts in it. You can really smell the aroma of the nuts as well. I also wanted to show you kind of a really clever idea of how you could, little pieces of wax paper come with different fancy, writings on. And this one happens to have coffee, all the different coffee themes written on it. So I just got one of the boxes. You can find these at stores or online, a little box, and it's got a little slide that slides right in and closes. It says, eat more cookies, eat more cookies. So you just put your cookies in there and then you slide this shut. So what I thought would be really nice is to put 3 of these cookies. They're so big, I don't think more than 3 would fit. So I'm gonna put 3 of my cookies in, and staying 6 feet apart and social distancing, I'm gonna bring them to my neighbor. So we have 3 cookies right here. We have our slide. Go ahead and just as there's a groove, make sure that I'm not going to ruin my cookies. Man, they're big. All right, so I just scooted in there. I have 3 cookies to bring to a neighbor. Delicious cookie, very easy to make, especially with the kids. Nuts or no nuts, coconut or no coconut. But believe me, The coconut is not a lot and it adds a lot of flavor. If you're not a coconut person, do try both. Take care.